All right, what's going on, everybody? Back with another podcast. I'm having Eddie back on because it was a lot of fun when we were on last time. If you guys didn't watch the last Eddie Smith podcast, I'll kind of leave a link right now under the video so you can click on that and watch it. But I'll let him do like a little short introduction of himself if you don't know about him or who he is, and then we'll get into it.
Yeah, what's up? Eddie, politics major at Loras College in Dubuque, Iowa, and yeah.
Yeah, simple and easy. So there's a lot of unrest going on in the country right now. Maybe not necessarily our sphere of the things, because there's always unrest on the left and what we're trying to do, but in kind of the more mainstream areas, like Trump supporters being out and rallying and doing everything, saying reopen the economy and stuff like that. So in your estimates and like I don't know how much you've kept up with the whole COVID situation, but when do you think, based on what you've looked at, this entire situation kind of will be over in terms of COVID being over?
When it'll be over, I just heard that Iowa we've got like the latest date for when we're supposed to peak, and it's like mid-May, I think, which actually isn't too bad. They said it's like a couple weeks off, and then hopefully a month after the peak is when they said hopefully it'll be back to normal. But it all depends on how well we social distance. And the reason why we're the latest is because Kim Reynolds was dragging her feet on issuing the stay-at-home order. So.
Yeah. And then along with that, when do you think that we should open the economy up again? Would that be, because this is my big issue with people who are out here protesting, like, and we'll get into that in a little bit, talking about maybe why they're protesting, but they have to understand that we have to take care of the problem that's causing the economy to shut down before we can actually reopen the economy again. So does the economy reopen right after we kind of try to get things back to normal, or do you have to slowly kind of reopen the economy back into the things that it kind of were before, which me and you don't want it to be like it was before, but that's right. What it's going to go back to.
Yeah. I was lucky enough this year. I was in a class where we were studying the Spanish flu of 1918 as we could see it coming, as it was developing in Wuhan, at the time when Trump was still calling it a hoax. We were learning about this stuff, but basically what happened with the Spanish flu is they had it for a month or 2 months or however long, and then they social distanced. We studied specific communities. The ones that quarantined and social distanced the most were the ones that were least affected. The ones where they kept the most stuff open was where they had the most deaths. And they closed down, it went away, and then they reopened too fast. And there was a second wave that hit and killed, like they were having parades and stuff, like, because like we're going to be pumped when everything reopens, this sucks. I'm sure they were pumped to get out there, and then another wave hit and they lost another, few more thousand people. So We'll see. It's just got to be, I don't know. We just got to listen to what the scientists are saying, I guess.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting that you bring that up, because it's kind of like history repeating itself in terms of like, there's going to be, I've seen a lot of scientists and doctors saying that it's going to come back in the fall after we reopen and move everything. There's going to be more outbreaks because people are going to be like, oh, it's over, it's gone. But it's not going to disappear overnight like Trump wants it, like he said it would, it would disappear like a miracle. You know what I mean? So it's just going to be like, it's going to be more of an individualized effort, I think, after kind of the government crackdown, if you want to call it that, kind of ends. But I don't know. I think we just need to urge people to be smart about what they're doing. You know what I mean? Like, and I don't know. I think that it's kind of one of those shifts. Like me and my sister were talking about how, how like older people, like the boomers, even older than the boomers, like the silent generation and people like that who lived through the Great Depression, they like store their money in mattresses and shit like that. They don't trust banks because the FDIC wasn't formed then, so they lost all their money. Like our kind of thing, maybe like we don't shake hands with people anymore, or like shit like that. You know what I mean? Like kind of scars that come along with the thing. I don't know if that's going to be a thing or not, but that'd be extremely interesting.
Yeah, it might change the culture forever. I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully people remember it and study it and learn what we can do to not have this happen.
Oh, and also you said something about quarantine. I saw this thing and it said that the reason that it's called quarantine is because During the like the Black Plague or whatever in Europe, they would make ships wait 60 days or 40 days or something like that before docking at shore. And that word, the word derives from like quad, like quarantine, like 40 or something like that. I don't know. It's kind of an interesting like historical fact about.
That is.
But so I'm going to try something different here, and excuse me if you're watching this and it doesn't work very well or whatever, because I think I have to play it through my speakers for you to be able to hear it and for the viewers to be able to hear it, but it should sound correct. We're going to play this video of these protesters, and then I kind of want to just dive into like maybe why they're protesting, because I think some are protesting for the wrong reasons, but maybe some have a valid reason to be out there protesting. So, let's hop on. Let's play this video real quick. It's only 50 seconds, and then we'll discuss.
Communism.
All right, so I think you kind of get like the gist of what's going on there. So there we go. So this whole thing, like these protesters are out here, some are like carrying their ARs or whatever, which that's a completely different issue, but like obviously people are out there for the wrong reasons. Like this woman, land of the free, go to China if you want communism. Like I think she's confusing China like communism with authoritarianism, which is what China is. But like some people, I can see that some people are out there for the right reasons. They're protesting for the wrong reasons though. Like maybe they're out there because they don't have money, they can't make the payments, but they need to redirect that anger at the federal government and their state governments who are failing to provide like proper unemployment for them. So like what would be your suggestion to these like protesters? Should they redirect their anger towards their government rather than like that guy who is just standing up to keep people safe, the doctor that was standing there?
Yeah, I think this is a great example of how our current economy and capitalism kind of lead people into the right. So a lot of people are out there because, like that lady that we watched, because their consumption is interrupted, right? So they live in the middle of the U.S. empire. We've exploited the crap out of the rest of the world, and there's a lot of products here available to consume. And I saw one video where one lady was like, I need to go get my hair done. They just can't, they can't fathom having their consumption halted. But then on the other hand, I've seen this through like some of my friends on Facebook, like you said, people just need to get back to work. Like they can't pay rent, they can't pay for their food. And the only way they have of making money is selling their labor, which now they're not allowed to do. So what do? Do they look at it and say, hey, why don't we radically transform the economy so that when something like this happens, we have stuff set aside to make sure that everybody's okay? No, they're just going to be like, hey, open up the economy, give me my freaking job back.
Yeah.
And they end up protesting with an AR-15 outside the Capitol. Like, really what you're arguing for is to go back into the crappy economy where you're getting screwed and your boss is, exploiting you for your labor, and you're paying insane amounts in rent and healthcare costs. And you're arguing to go back to that when you should be arguing saying, hey, how can this happen? How can like a disease comes through and all of a sudden everything shuts down and nobody has enough money to survive anymore?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you have to understand that these people need to redirect their anger to the system as a whole, rather than, you know what I mean, like trying to go back to the shitty economy and the shitty like things that we had in place before. Maybe this should be an event that, radicalizes you, if you want to call it that, like radicalizes you to be in favor of like a Bernie Sanders type platform where, you know what I mean, like a system, like a complete economic collapse like this, there will be a safety net for people who need it. Like I know there's like 22 million people who are unemployed now, and maybe not all those people, all those people, like the vast majority of those people don't have any money saved up. 78% of America like lives paycheck to paycheck. So it's like these people need to redirect their anger at the system rather than coming at like people who are just having to shut down the economy to save lives and stuff like that. It's just
It reminds me of the psychological like phenomenon of racism, right? So you have white poor people, they're angry that they're poor, they're angry that they have to go to work every day, and they're still just getting by. So then who do they blame? You know, the media is telling them, oh, blame these immigrants, blame these black people who are on welfare, when in reality, you know, like immigrants and black people produce tons for the economy, and the amount that you know, the amount that we pay into welfare is minuscule compared to the amount we pay in corporate subsidies. And it's like the real leeches are the people on top, but they trick you into looking down. You know what I mean? They trick you into looking for the wrong enemy. And that's how they, you know, continue. That's how they keep power.
Yeah. And we're going to get into the freaking corporate like slush fund that Trump handed out, the $4 trillion bailout to all these different corporations. We'll get into that in a little bit. But I've seen a lot of people kind of with like our ideological stance say that we need to go to like an Andrew Yang position of UBI. So do you think, maybe not as a whole thing, because I'm sure like there's kind of competing philosophies between like a jobs guarantee and a UBI, like those kind of things kind of compete with each other, which you can debate on a different thing. But like for the remainder of the entire economic collapse that we're seeing right now, should there be like a $2,000 minimum UBI? And like, what should that entail? Should that be people who are, you know, 16 and over, 18 and over, 21 and over? I mean, should there be stipulations? Should we have no strings attached like we do to all the corporate bailouts? You know what I mean? So I don't know if you're on board with the UBI right now or.
Yeah, I mean, for right now, I mean, freaking Mitt Romney was calling for $2,000 a month for like 16 or older. Mitt Romney? Are you kidding me? Like, he's on the left in America? What is going on? And yeah, especially after getting left out of the last one, like I would like that check. Like I have to pay rent and food and stuff.
Yeah.
And, you know, just because I'm a dependent on my parents, like, yeah, they can take care of me, but now they're taking a huge financial hit because they're having to support me and I can't work at all.
Yeah.
So I would like it personally, and I'm sure that would help alleviate a lot of the struggles that people are feeling. Like I said, there's still going to be people out there protesting because they're just mad that their endless consumption that they've become accustomed to is like being interrupted. But there's also people who just need money so they can live, you know, and survive. I think that would help alleviate that for a lot of people.
Yeah, and we could talk about how like somewhat like bullshit the last thing was, like the entire last CARES Act was, with like obviously the corporate slush fund. Then there was like my parents, for example. My parents do well enough to where they didn't qualify to the whole thing. Being married together, they make over a certain amount, whatever it was. But also, it's like they do too well. They're just above the bottom of the barrel to where they do too well to where they can't get anything, but they're not rich enough to where they can reach millions of dollars in payouts. You know what I mean? So it's just like, it's completely backwards that there's like crumbs for me. You know this, there's crumbs for the bottom. And then, you know, here, take your one-time payment of $1,200 that will be all ate up in rent payment. And then, you know what I mean? Then the rest of the month you have to fight for yourself. And then it's just like such a backwards thing. Like, it's not like my parents are living large or like we live large. You know what I mean? We have a normal house. You know what I mean? We still make payments. It's not like they have thousands of dollars in the bank saved up, but they just do well enough where they didn't quite qualify for the thing, and they weren't rich enough to get millions of dollars in bailout. It's so backwards, and the entire system. These people need to redirect their anger at the system, like you said.
100%.
So. Yeah, let's kind of switch gears. Let's talk about the whole corporate slush fund that Trump gave out. I think it's somewhere along the lines of like, he said it's like $1 trillion, but really there's a cap up to $4 trillion, and he didn't really put anybody in charge of watching over it. There's no strings attached. So it shows the priority that we want to bail out the cruise line industry, and they didn't even have like a U.S. Address to them. It was like foreign countries who were in control of them. And like we care about these companies rather than everyday people and their workers. You know what I mean? It's just
yeah, I mean, this is the system. Like, it's built to work this way. Like, obviously this crash was triggered by the COVID-19, but it was going to come either way. Since the Great Depression, you know, or since the inception of capitalism, there's crises that are built into the system. Every 6 to 12 years, there's a crisis. This was right on time. And when we crash, the people at the bottom get nothing. Small businesses go under, workers are hurt, and then the people at the top also crash, but then our government comes in and just prints out money for them, which has consequences. Now we're in a point where we have more debt in circulation than we have actual money. So there's other consequences for that, but essentially what happens is when the economy comes back up, those same people who were screwing or who crashed the economy are still in power, and there are way less small businesses, so there's less competition. So more of that wealth is concentrated at the top. I saw billionaires have gone up, their total combined wealth has gone up 238 billion over the time of this crisis. And that's how it works. You know, all of us struggle, all of us hurt, the ones who provide labor, which creates the wealth of society. And the people at the top get bailed out by the state because they own the state. And we don't care how much debt they fear. Remember how they used to fearmonger about the debt, and how every time we try and pay for healthcare, how do we pay? You know, we're $23 trillion in debt now, though, as we dump trillions more into, like you said, cruise liners. And people are going to go out of business. Small businesses will go out of business, and that creates less competition. More of the percentage of the total wealth that's in circulation goes to the top 1% and the less that we have. And that's how the system works. That's how it's built to work. And until you put in huge reforms to stop that from happening, that's how it's going to continue to operate. And in 10 years, we'll have another crash, and who knows how bad it'll be by then, you know?
Yeah. And another thing, even when the economy is working like it's supposed to, you know what I mean, where the top is doing very well and the middle class and the bottom are just kind of sliding by, you know what I mean, they're making it a little bit. But it's like the stock market, it's a completely backwards type thing where, like, when it's doing extremely well, I think it's like, it's some absurd amount, some absurd percentage, like 78 or above, like 78% of the stock market is owned by the 1% or something like that. Some crazy shit to where, like, we don't own stocks, you know what I mean? And if you do own stocks, it's a minuscule amount compared to what, like, the 1% own. So, like, when the stock market is soaring, everybody's like, oh my God, look at the stock market. Like, that's not a reflection of how everyday people are doing. But then the second it crashes, we have to come out of our paycheck to, you know, we have to fund the corporations who need the bailout, quote unquote, need the bailout. And it's like, it's such a backwards thing. It's like, it's privatize the gains, socialize the losses is kind of the idea there.
And it's crazy because they couldn't do anything without the workers. The workers, literally, if they came together, if this is why unions are so important, you know, if they came together and said, no, we're not going to work until you give us more of money, or you give us more stock in the company, or you let 50% of the board be people who actually work for the company so we can make decisions in the interest of labor. Like, they could do that because these people can't function without us. They've just tricked us into working into the system for them. They're creating more and more wealth for them. And then when it crashes, because crashes are built into the system, the government comes and scoops up some money from us and dumps it into cruise lines.
Yeah, man. I just don't. It's just the entire system is completely backwards. And honestly, you've pushed me more into the thought of unions, because really unions haven't. When I first got into politics, the things that I cared about were like Medicare for all, which is obviously extremely important. But unions, after talking to you on the first show, and then, you know, kind of talking back and forth, unions have shot up my list of in terms of importance, because you said something that kind of like struck with me, is that unions are our way of making change, because these people, while they're powerful and while they're rich, they're only powerful and rich because of us. So if we are able to unionize and rise up against these kind of people, then there's literally nothing they can do. And it's like, I saw the people who are out protesting right now, a lot of them, like you said, they just want to get a haircut or something. They don't want to go back to work because they're fine right now. They're at home doing their at-home job, whatever they're doing. They want you to go back to work so that you can provide services to them that are like irrelevant right now. So.
I mean, it all stems from like the labor theory of value. So think like if you take wood from nature and you carve it into a chair, like it takes labor to do that. And there are people who put in labor to manufacture things or to perform services for people. And then there are people who are paying those people to make a profit off their labor. So those people, as much as they like to trick us into thinking they're the smartest people in the room, and a lot of times they are smart combined with ruthless, and that's how they get to the top in a capitalist society. They get there by stepping on people because they're not actually creating anything. But then the other side of that is, like we said, if you have a union, you can halt their wealth, because at the end of the day, you are what's creating their wealth. So if you guys decide to go on strike and demand something, then you can, because then you're hurting their capital, which is all they really care about, is their money. You have to hit them in their money if you want the changes you want. And I mean, that's how we got rid of child labor. That's how we got a 5-day week, the 2-day weekend. That's how we got 40-hour work week. It was all for unions striking, fighting, and clawing for it. So if we want to make more advancements, I think that's the key, especially since with Bernie and Corbyn this year, we've seen how ineffective the political spectrum can be and how much control the ruling class has over our politics, our electoral politics. So
Yeah. Yeah, it really comes down to everyday people have to rise up. You know what I mean? You can have a politician be put out there, and he could say all the right things, but when it comes down to it, the people who are in power will pull strings to cut them off. You saw it with Corbyn, you saw it with Bernie. So it's like, it's a tricky situation that we're in. You know what I mean? In America, and we have been in this situation for a long, long time, to where if you're not part of that ruling class, you have no say at the table. I mean, I don't know how much have you ever looked into, it's a comedian. I can't remember what his name is. It's like this old guy. Why am I blanking on
George
his name?
Carlin?
George Carlin, yeah.
Oh,
Like George Carlin always talked about all kinds of stuff. Like, he was always ahead of his time. Like, I mean, he puts it bluntly to where, like, your vote doesn't matter. The choices that you have right now, you know what I mean? You have 32 choices of what kind of bagel you want, what kind of donut you want. You know what I mean? You can choose between 12 different Gatorades, but like when it comes to real choices that matter, it's like, there's like 3 or 4 main health insurance companies in America. There's 2 political parties. You know what I mean? There's all these things that, when real choice matters, it's shrinking and shrinking and becoming more monopolized for like real choices that matter. But with the shit that's like irrelevant, like what kind of donut you want, you know what I mean? It's expanding. It's just, it's kind of like feeding the stupid mind almost. Like, oh, I have choice. I have freedom of choice here, but you don't. You know what I mean? With things that really matter, you don't. And I don't know.
right, I agree. And the only people who do have choice are those who are born into wealth, or who are able to find a way to gain capital and exploit other people's labor to gain their own wealth. Then you have choice. Then you can go to college, and you can take classes in art and read and fulfill yourself. But if you're working 40 hours a week plus, a lot of people work a lot more than that, and taking care of 3 kids with no childcare available, and you have these costs of healthcare and rent, which are 50% of the average worker's wages, then you don't have much choice. Then your life pretty much becomes, I need to work and I need to save my money. I need to not spend on anything that would make me happy. Oh, fuck.
What?
Oh, shit. Oh, that didn't happen to you?
What happened?
I thought we got disconnected.
No, I'm still on. No, you're good.
My call just closed for some reason. All right, what was that going on about?
I don't know. I kind of.
Oh, how only rich people have choice. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of my friends who had to join the military in order to pay for their college. It's like, what kind of choice is that? You got the choice of $80,000 in debt, or you have to go kill people if you want to like further your learning. It's like, is that the kind of society we want to have?
Yeah. I think I'd suggest anybody who hasn't checked out George Carlin. I don't know what your thoughts are on him as a whole, but I mean, the dude was way ahead of his time, man. On almost every issue, he was freaking awesome, and he did it in such a comedic way, to where he was funny, but he was making a really like interesting point that mattered. But I just finished typing this paper for sociology, and I'm sure you kind of like sociology. What are your thoughts on, I know a lot of people on the right like to think that we live in a meritocracy. That's a big word on the right. Like, if you work hard, you know what I mean? You can build yourself up, which we know is bullshit. But like, do you think a meritocracy is possible? And if it is possible, should that be the way that we go?
Yeah, I think that we should work to eliminate the rigid hierarchies that we currently have, that and they're generational in a way, but like we've said, so even if you work hard to gain money, right, it's all in the pursuit of wealth, which is questionable. You're not pursuing things that, typically we think of good things for humans to pursue, gaining knowledge, learning art, learning,
Yeah.
doing sports. You're not pursuing those things, spending time with your family. It's the less of that you do, and the more you focus on wealth and the more people you exploit, the better you do and the more money you make. So it's like most people who make it to the top inherit at least something, but some of them do work really hard. But it's a system that incentivizes um, pushing down another class and acquiring more and more for yourself, and ignoring the other great parts about life in order to get more wealth. And then eventually you die, I guess, and hopefully you have a mountain of wealth by the time you die. So
Yeah.
it's like, I think we should create a meritocracy in a way that I think we should create things like college that's available for everyone. Everything,
Yeah.
every workplace is unionized. No, but childcare is paid for and available. Like, you have say over your workplace. Everyone's getting paid enough to survive. In the Soviet Union, I know obviously they did some things that we look back on as bad, but rent there was 2% and utilities were 4% of the average worker's wage on average. And here in the US, they're about 30%. So it's like there are things that we can do from experiments in the past to create the kind of society that we want. But in order to do that, we need to take steps to control the economy,
Yeah.
and make the economy serve or work for everyone, work for the laborers, not just
Yeah.
encourage one class to exert as much force over another class as they can.
Yeah. And I think the best, obviously no like economic system, no philosophy is without its own flaws. There's flaws in everything, but you want to, obviously the goal is to make the least amount of flaws so it works for the most amount of people. And I really do think one of the major downfalls in society, and this is kind of like a sociological type thing, is like the starting line is so obscure on so many different levels that, like, if you can make, not, it's not equal of outcome, but rather like equality of like start, to where like if you can start on an almost equal footing with somebody, then a real meritocracy will take place. And like you can debate the merits of a meritocracy in itself, but like if that's the goal, if we live in a society that's already built on that, we should try to make the starting line as close to it as it can be, and that entails making college tuition free, so people don't start $80,000 in debt while the other person starts with plus $10 million, like Donald Trump or something like that. Like, you have to set up a system to where the starting line is somebody's not starting 100 yards back, somebody's not starting a mile back when other people are starting a mile in front, or I don't know. That's just a huge thing to me, is making it more of an equal start, so people actually have the opportunity to grow.
Yeah, I mean, if we're gonna do this current system, that's what we want. But and also I think that's what a lot of the reforms FDR put in place were. But a lot of basically Republicans' job since the 80s has been to do more austerity and repeal as many social programs as they can. So I worry that as long as we allow a class to exist who's inherently exploiting people who work, they're always going to end up buying the state, and they're always going to end up using it as a tool to do what they want. Um, but of course, like if you look at like the social democracies, the Scandinavian countries that you bring up a lot, like yeah, if
Yeah.
you're gonna do capitalism, like you have to do it like that, or you
Yeah.
should do it like that. You need to have more worker control, and you need, like you said, an equal starting line, so people have the same opportunities for education, and if they get sick, they have the same right to health care, because we have the ability to give everybody health care. We have the resources to do it. So you decide as a society you're going to do that. I think that would definitely be better than capitalism. I
Yeah.
just worry about the ability to regulate capitalism and how long it'll last before eventually it gets back to the point we're at.
Yeah. So we're gonna dive in a little bit of we've kind of already went into economics a little bit, but let's dive in a little bit more. But first, I want to show another video, and hopefully I do a little bit better job than last time trying to click out of it and everything. This video is, I think it's a little bit longer, but it's kind of really interesting. It's not a woman shouting at somebody. It's wealth and income inequality visualized. And let me kind of explain what's going on here, because I did skip a little bit because I thought 6 minutes was a little bit too long. This is basically what you're looking at right now is a graph of the poor being on the left and the richest people being on the right, and obviously filling in the middle. And this is, you can read the screen, it's distribution that 92% of Americans choose as ideal. So this is what Americans think capitalism should look like. And like we can have our problems with this, but I do think that this scale, compared to like obviously what you're about to see, is a pretty good scale, a good representation of, if you're going to do capitalism, this is what it should look like. So let's just kind of watch this video and then we'll discuss.
Transition into wealth. And yes, Republicans and Democrats alike chose this curve. 9 out of 10 people, 92%, said this was a nice, ideal distribution of America's wealth. But let's move on. This is what people think America's wealth distribution actually looks like. Not as equitable, clearly, but for me, even this still looks pretty great. Yes, the poorest 20 to 30% are starting to suffer quite a lot compared to the ideal, and the middle class is certainly struggling more than they were, while the rich and wealthy are making roughly 100 times that of the poorest Americans and about 10 times that of the still healthy middle class. Sadly, this isn't even close to the reality. Here is the actual distribution of wealth in America. The poorest Americans don't even register. They're down to pocket change. And the middle class is barely distinguishable from the poor. In fact, even the rich between the top 10 and 20 percentile are worse off. Only the top 10% are better off. And how much better off? So much better off that the top 2 to 5% are actually off the chart at this scale. And the top 1%, this guy, well, his stack of money stretches 10 times higher than we can show. Here's his stack of cash, restacked, all by itself. This is the top 1% we've been hearing so much about. So much green in his pockets that I have to give him a whole new column of his own, because he won't fit on my chart. 1% of America has 40% of all the nation's wealth. The bottom 80%, 8 out of every 10 people, or 80 out of these 100, only has 7% between them. And this has only gotten worse in the last 20 to 30 years. While the richest 1% take home almost a quarter of the national income today, in 1976, they took home only 9%. Meaning their share of income has nearly tripled in the last 30 years. The top 1% own half the country's stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. The bottom 50% of Americans own only 0.5% of these investments, which means they aren't investing. They're just scraping by. I'm sure many of these wealthy people have worked very hard for their money. But do you really believe that the CEO is working 380 times harder than his average employee? Not his lowest paid employee, not the janitor, but the average earner in his company. The average worker needs to work more than a month to earn what the CEO makes in 1 hour. We certainly don't have to go all the way to socialism to find something that is fair for hardworking Americans.
I don't know.
We don't even have to achieve what most of us consider might be ideal. All we need to do is wake up and realize that the reality in this country is not at all what we think it is.
All right, so that entire video is fucking mind-boggling to me, because we know how crazy we can tell in numbers. You could say it out loud. We kind of have it in our minds how crazy income inequality is in America. But that graph is it's mind-blowing, because even people think that we're getting screwed over. Like, we know that we are, and the second chart showed that. But it's like what we think is like not even we wish that what we think is happening is the reality, because like you said, the average CEO makes 380 times what the average worker makes. Like, is this guy, like, does the market really value that dude's like work that much more than the average worker? Like, not even close. You know what I mean? Like, how does that guy, what did he do? Like, that makes his market wealth so much higher than the average worker who's providing the wealth in the first place.
I mean, he's learned how to pay his workers little and how to sell products, or have them make products that get them a high return or provide services. I mean, that's how you get that wealthy. I remember I showed that video my freshman year of in our intro to politics class in a presentation. I didn't know anything, but I was like, look, isn't this like insane? Like, people starve, you guys know, and like, look how much money these guys have. And I'm like, I'm assuming they're just like finding tax loopholes and not paying taxes. But I was just guessing at the time, and now we know that's true. Like, Amazon and the richest companies are paying zero in taxes. But this kid that got mad at me, he's like, my uncle is rich, he pays taxes. It's like, dude, you saw the difference between like the top, 20% and then like the top 1%. Like, I'm not talking about your uncle who owns like a lawnmower store. I'm talking about Jeff Bezos, who has like $100 billion in wealth, and people bring up like the idea like, well, that's not actual money, that's how much they own and like assets and stuff. Like, that's worse. That means like they have control over so many people's lives. Gates, Buffett, and Bezos own more wealth than the bottom 50% of the country combined. It's like, think about how much power that is over the lives of so many individual people and how much power they have over our government. It's insane. And what we need to do is what Norway's done is they've nationalized their fossil fuel industry. So all the money from that goes to the people. And then they're using that to create or to strengthen their other industries and create like worker-owned industries that then continue to return capital to the country. Whereas like Venezuela, I like Venezuela, but what they did was nationalize their oil industry, and they started just paying people, like giving people food who didn't have it, and just paying for schools, which worked. It made people way smarter and cut hunger by a third and extreme hunger by 50%. But then the U.S. came in, sanctioned the oil industry, and that's all they had to do, and the entire country collapsed. And then we go, oh, look how terrible socialism is. Whereas Norway is set up, and Norway hasn't been attacked by the U.S., but they've set up, these other worker-controlled industries, and that's what we need to do with our economy. Otherwise, you're going to have people with these absurd amounts of wealth, which isn't just money, that's assets and that's power that they have over people's lives.
Yeah, I mean, that video is just, every time I watch, I've probably watched that video like 5 or 6 times, the whole thing. It's just like, it's just mind-numbing to me that we've gotten to such a extreme point, and not even historically have we been like this at the point where we are now. Like, I can't remember what they said in the video. It's something like in the 1960s or 70s, it was only 6 or 7%. Something like their wealth has grown like 25% or something since the 1970s. I mean, that you can get into like a marginal tax rate and stuff like that we like basically don't have anymore. But you brought up the oil industry. How do we, like, what's going on with the oil industry right now, how it's like, it's more profitable to not own oil right now than it is to own it. People are basically selling their oil. What do you think we should do about that? Trump, I don't know if you want, I put out a video, Trump said that we need to bail out oil, which obviously you and I both disagree with, I'm sure. What do we let it die? That's like, honestly, if you want my 100 straight up opinion, we let it die and we invest in a green new energy, do a green new deal to where we can create tens of millions of new jobs, good paying jobs. I mean, that's my entire idea behind it. Then the U.S. can actually be a world leader in something, you know what I mean? We can, other than income and wealth inequality, we can be a world leader in something that's actually positive to its people and not just the top 1%.
I think that would be fine, except at this point, the economy runs off 85% oil, right? So like basically every industry relies on fossil fuels because it's like a miracle fuel. You can just burn it and get insane amounts of power. But obviously we need to wean off, but there's no financial incentive for that. So first of all, for the oil crisis, what we need to do is we need to go to OPEC and we need to set a level on how much can be produced. That's what Venezuela did in 2002 and they like steadied the oil prices so that they could continue to make money off of their oil, which they would then put into their other areas of their economy to solve hunger. And the U.S. freaked out, like, how could you talk to OPEC? They got Saudi Arabia to start producing tons of oil on purpose just to hurt Venezuela, which I just think is funny to bring up because now we're in the same situation. We're like, oh, OPEC, help us out, and they will because we're the U.S. But so we should do that, and then we should nationalize fossil fuels. So we should do what Norway has done. We should be like, sorry, fossil fuel executives, we're literally taking your company, like all your workers still employed, but like you're gone. We were going to have to bail you out anyways. Go live on an island for the rest of your life. You were destroying the planet and lying about it. Like this, and then from then on, you use the fossil fuel industry to fund the Green New Deal. So as you wean yourself off of fossil fuels, you start to smother the industry and replace it with new green energy, and you transfer people who are working those jobs, because we don't want to lose the people working those jobs. We transfer them into the green energy sector. We create new jobs because the green energy isn't as efficient as fossil fuel. So if we want to keep up the efficiency of our economy, we're going to need to create more jobs in that sector, which is great. We can create more jobs in the green energy sector. But to do that, you need control over your economy. Like, the private market's not going to do that. Obviously, the fossil fuel executives, if you bail them out, they're just going to keep trying to make as much money as they can, which is bad for workers and for the planet, of course. So that's my long answer.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good answer. I think that, I lost my train of thought. I mean, obviously we have to invest in green. Oh, that's what I was going to bring up. What do you consider green new energy? Do you think that there's room for nuclear energy? Like, what's your stance on that whole thing? I mean, it's good. It's great. Nuclear energy, I think I don't know. You said the correct thing, that green new energy isn't as strong as fossil fuel, but I'm pretty sure, isn't nuclear energy like just as strong, if not stronger?
I think so. I don't know enough about it. I've read a couple articles, but yeah.
Yeah, so like obviously it's great until a Chernobyl incident happens. So I mean, I think that maybe we start with some nuclear energy, and then you kind of wean off that as well. Like after you don't put greedy corporate execs in charge of it. You know what I mean? You nationalize the whole thing to where people aren't trying to profit off of it when it's, you know what I mean?
Yeah, the only thing I worry about is we're so deep into climate change now, and like I said, it's going to take a while to wean our way off of these fossil fuels. Like, how bad are these storms going to get, and where are we putting these nuclear plants, right? Because if all of a sudden there's a bunch of tropical storms and we have a shitload of like nuclear reactors, that's going to be really bad.
Yeah,
that's like my basic like primitive mind is being like, I don't know, big storms hit nuclear reactors could be bad, but I don't know. Like, obviously, scientists need to be like consulted on that, and the situation's getting more drastic by the day. We have to make these changes, so it might be our only option too.
Yeah, like how about what you just said, like the plan you laid out with the whole nationalize the fossil fuel industry, what you just said. Obviously, that's a great idea, and I think most Americans not only believe climate change is happening, but think that we need to do something about it right now. But we're not. I mean, if Trump's in charge, it's not going to happen, clearly. If Biden's in charge, we're not going to do near as much as we need to do. So, like, how bad does it need to get before people, like, wake the fuck up and realize, like, we're in a pandemic before the actual pandemic hit us? You know what I mean? Like, we're in a pandemic. Like, the earth is literally fucking dying around us. The ice caps are melting, then that causes sea levels to rise, which causes more extreme winter weather events, which causes more hurricanes. You know how it all goes. So, like, how bad does that have to get before people, like, wake the fuck up? Or will they ever wake up as long as there's a profit motive involved?
Yeah, I mean, for sure the fossil fuel executives won't wake up, right? Like, they're just trying to make money. Like, they could watch the whole world burn. They wouldn't care. But at least the people at the very top. But yeah, man, I don't know. I wonder that all the time because I thought eventually a bunch of storms would start hitting and people would freak out. But then I've been reading like Katrina was climate change like enhanced. The one that hit Puerto Rico was climate change. Like, we're starting to see these storms already and people aren't putting the connection together. Venice was flooded,
Yeah.
So I worry, and what we need to do, like that plan I laid out is so drastic. and like we're so far from getting it. And I studied the even the Paris Climate Agreement, you know. So like, here's the choice we have in America. So the Paris Climate Agreement, what they agreed to during that wasn't nearly enough, not even close to what scientists need to say we do. And then if you look at the emissions that each country was doing, none of the countries were even following it. So it's this useless agreement, and everyone's like, oh, Obama and Biden are so wonderful. Look what they did for the environment.
Yeah.
The agreement wasn't good enough, one, and two, they weren't following it. So that's our choice on the left. And then on the right, you have Trump, whose EPA published a report saying, yeah, climate change is real. Yes, it's getting worse, but they literally said it's so bad at this point, we're not going to do anything about it. We might as well just continue as is. That's what the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency of this country, said. So those are our choices. You know, you have like, hey, we're doing something, but they're secretly not, the wolf in sheep's clothing, the Democrats. Or you have like the bumbling idiot freaking reality TV show host who's doing the bidding of the Koch brothers and the fossil fuel executives. So what a great choice we have.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like we're fucked either way, to be honest. It's like, I don't know what, like, the situation that we're in, like, sure, it's lesser of two evils. Maybe they'll, you know what I mean, they'll sign it, they'll dot a piece of paper, Biden will, and be like, oh, look at what I did. You know, people will celebrate. White liberal moms will have a glass of wine that night. But, like, it's not.
We did it.
Yeah, we did it. But, like, it's not near as not, like, what we have to do is, like, so radically change everything that we're doing. It's just, is it even feasible? Like, in my mind, I don't know if it is anymore. Like, are we just like doomed? Like, it's like a really dreary look, but like, the people don't care. People just don't care. As long as, if it's not going to affect them, Joe Biden's going to be long dead before he sees the long lasting effects. Like, we're going to be old as shit when we see like the actual really hardcore effects of climate change. But like, people don't care if it's not in their profit motive, and if it's not going to affect them. It's just like, why care? You know what I mean? It's
yeah. Once people have capital, they essentially become a personification of that capital, right? They're just like, all they know at that point, once you're at the top of a fossil fuel company, is create more wealth for my company. Like, that's what your imperative is to do, and that's what you're going to keep doing. And that's what the system is. The system tells you, like, personal wealth equals you're doing good, you're winning the system, and personal wealth destroys the planet. You know, if you read Ian Angus's Facing the Anthropocene, it's like a Marxist look at like what we need to do to save the planet. There's a metabolic rift between the planet and like capitalism. So essentially everything like in nature, it grows, it has life, and then it dies and it returns to the soil and it's nutrients for something else. But we've become so productive as humans. Like, if you look at LA or our giant cities, we've essentially destroyed that. We're just dumping our shit into the rivers. We're obviously emitting CO2, which is the biggest problem. And there's no incentive to stop. The only incentive is to keep going, and to keep going faster. The faster we can go, the better. And, you know, we can do what we can in the political realm, but until there's somebody in the political realm who's saying, no, we need to take control of the economy, there's nothing we can do, because that's what is fueling our production, you know, and that's what's destroying the planet.
And that's what I fucking love about politics, is that, like, not the obviously death to America and death to fucking planet part, but the fact that everything's connected. Like, everything is connected, dude. Like, if we don't, I mean, how do we save the planet? I mean, you have to change the economic stance that we're doing in America. And how do you do that? You have to do this and do this, and it leads you down a tunnel that, like, you have to do all these things. It's such a chain reaction to, like, actually have a better America and have a better life. And I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's just, that's what I love about this shit. And I mean, nobody knows everything about politics, and I'm sure I'm wrong on a bunch of shit, but like this, like, you know what I mean? It's just like, you have to almost study and better yourself every day if you want to have any chance of like keeping up with political like ideology, and, you know what I mean, staying up to date and actually being able to stand up for your ideals. And it's just a really cool like idea that you have to better yourself every day in politics to be able to know things.
For sure, yeah. And like, there's so many different things that go into it. There's like human psychology, there's economics, there's actual politics, there's sociology, there's
history.
And then history is that's what I was gonna say, is probably the most important one. is
Yeah.
understanding the history of political movements, of workers' movements. Like we said, the understanding that unions are like our biggest tool as leftists, like throughout history. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's switch gears a little bit, kind of dive into more of maybe a Bernie Sanders style, I don't know, like his kind of economic ideas and what like he thought, because that's kind of what I know. This is kind of just like a more in-depth question, I guess. So obviously we're both for tuition-free college, because I think the economic payoff of it is way larger than what you'd actually have to put into it. I mean, Trump's military budget increase last year alone would pay for tuition-free college this year. So like the economic payoff is so great that like middle-class Americans no longer have this shackle of student loan debt tied to their leg. Like my dad is damn near 60 years old. He's about to retire and he's still paying student loans.
Holy
Like
shit.
the idea that like, yeah, it's just like, so thinking about that, like a personal story, like my dad, he's still paying student loan debt. Think about all that money that he if he wouldn't have had to pay back, that he could be putting into upgrading our house, that he could be putting into the economy. You know what I mean? Like, so how do you think that eliminating student loan debt and with the free college idea, how does that help middle-class Americans economically, and how does that help the economy as a whole? Because it does help everybody. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think the argument of like, how do we pay for it? It's like, what are you talking about? Of course, like we're already paying for all this stuff. That like cut a fraction of the military and like one war. It's like, all right, we're coming home from Afghanistan.
Yeah.
We're not paying for that anymore. We're gonna do college instead. Like you could do it so easily. And then there's also, like you said, the idea of like a trickle up economy. So if you have all these people entering the workforce, like I'm about to enter the workforce with $80,000 in student loan, like that's a payment every month that I'm going to be making to a debtor when I could be spending that on goods, services, small businesses, whatever in my community that would, like you said, help the economy. And I think the other thing about free college is like, we're talking about how everything's connected. I think it's a move away from like looking at everything as an individual thing. Like you have to earn everything. It's like, well, how is a high school kid like supposed to like earn college? You don't know anything when you're in high school. You're an idiot. Like we said, we used to watch Ben Shapiro and be like, libertarians who know nothing about actual life. Like once you like you're an idiot and you expect high school kids at the age of 14 to start saving for themselves to pay for college if their parents aren't responsible enough to do it, you know, or don't have the means to do it. So it's something looking at it collectively, like, all right, we're a society here, we're a country, we live here together, and we want our society to be smarter. So we're going to make sure that everyone has access to these higher learning institutions where they can get smarter. So if they earn it, if they work hard in high school, we'll let them in there based on merit rather than based on the size of their pocketbook. And I like that too. Switch from looking at everything as rugged individualism to, you know, as a collective, we're going to do this. We're going to do education as best we can.
Yeah, the way that you put that is great, because it's a really big misconception. Like people on the right, or even people who aren't well versed in the entire idea of like tuition-free college, are like, oh, you're just going to let everybody get into college? Like you're just going to let this dude who gets all D's and F's get into, you know, Harvard or some shit, which tuition-free college probably wouldn't cover Harvard, but because it's a private school. But like you still have to work hard for it. Like you're not just going to be automatically accepted into any college. It's just once you get accepted into that college after putting the work in, you don't have to open up your pocketbook to the tune of 80 grand or whatever it is, and then be in debt for like how many, like 20 years in the future. It's just like you're still working hard. There's still a work aspect to it, if you want to frame it in that way, because people think that just because you don't have money you don't work or whatever. But like there's still a work aspect to it. Like you're still working hard in high school, which is however hard you have to work in high school, which probably isn't that hard because high school is pretty easy. But like you're not just letting everybody into college based on that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was like that. Scandal happened a while back where they found out a bunch of rich like celebrities were paying for their kids to get into college. It's like, right now we don't have a meritocracy. We have bloodsuckers who have all the wealth who are paying to get their kids to these colleges. I'm saying take out the profit motive for college, or take out the money factor entirely and only let people in there based on what they did in high school, actually how hard they worked. How hard they work to learn the material and to study their shit, that's who should get into college, not people whose parents start on Full House or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that was one of the ladies who got busted, was like an actress from Full House.
And the kid was like, I just want to go for the party experience, like. Yeah, and then she gets her way paid through, you know what I mean? It's just, and how many kids in Harlem or whatever who are born and have nothing and can't afford to go to college because they have to work a 9 to 5 or whatever for their entire life just to be able to pay the rent and get food. Like, how many of those kids are actually like the people who could cure cancer, the people that could, you know what I mean? Like, that could take us to Mars. Like, these kids are like smart people, you know what I mean? But they just can't thrive in an economic system that just puts them under day in and day out. So
yeah, it's that one quote that it's like, I can't remember the guy's name, like Gould or something. He said, I'm less concerned with the machinations of Einstein's mind and more concerned with everybody who had the same capacity who died in a sweatshop or a field or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like we're allowing so much innovation, that the right claims to love innovation. Like, we're allowing innovation and potential to die every day, with people who are born into a crappy situation without the tools they need to succeed.
Yeah, and like your friends, I don't know how intelligent your friends are or not, but like they had to sign their lives away to go fight in wars that we shouldn't be in the first place, which is an entire another thing. But like, just so they can elevate their knowledge and like expand themselves to where they'll be like credible enough to become whatever they want to become, you know what I mean? Whether it be a doctor or like a business person. Like, these people are smart enough to do it, and there's so many people who like you said, we should base college off like a person's knowledge rather than the size of their pocketbook, which is just a great way to put it. So let's kind of this is a question that I get a lot that is not hard to answer, but it is one of those, like, well, let me back up a little bit. This is why I hate debates because it's the person, not necessarily the smartest person or the person who has the right stance on things, but who wins, but rather the person who can throw in the best gotcha. You know what I mean? So like, if somebody is correct on the merits and on their ideas and they're right, because somebody is right, but they can't necessarily put it into words, or somebody else puts it into words better, then that person wins the debate. It's like, there's this guy that always calls debates the WWE of intellectual pursuits, which is like kind of true. It's just like fake, like you're showing knowledge, but you're really not. So this is kind of a gotcha question that the right likes to throw at people a lot who want to raise the minimum wage. So what they say a lot is, yeah, you could raise the minimum wage, but how are these small businesses going to be able to afford it? How are mom and pop shops going to be able to afford it? When we talk about raising the minimum wage, we're talking about like Amazon and Disney and all these places. Like, what would you say to somebody like that who says that small businesses can't afford to raise the minimum wage?
Yeah, I think the minimum wage is probably sort of a Band-Aid, because we want these small businesses to have way more power and money. Like, we want their workers also to have more power within those small businesses, but what we want to do is create more local community small businesses and get rid of the corporatocracy that we have. So I think minimum wage is kind of a Band-Aid, but it's like, people always say, if you don't like your job, just leave, or deal with it. And it's like, why don't we say that to businesses? Like, if you can't afford to pay someone enough so that they don't starve to death, or so that they can't meet their basic needs in life. I guess we don't have that much starvation or death by starvation, I guess, but to meet their basic needs without going into mountains of debt, like, you don't get to have a business then. Why is it that only the workers are supposed to be individualists? And then if we're like, hey, maybe the workers should have a little more money and the minimum wage should be tied to inflation. So when inflation happens, the wages go up so they can meet their basic needs. It's like, nope, that might hurt the business owners. It's like, our society is so like built around helping business owners, which is, a smaller and smaller amount of people as wealth and power becomes concentrated at the top. So that's kind of what I would say.
Yeah, and also I think a compromise position that you could come to, because the ideas that we talk about, like a lot of them, you're going to have to compromise something because it's politics and that's what you have to do, unfortunately, even though me and you are right about 100% of things. You have to compromise. So I think a compromise position you could do on the Band-Aid that is the minimum wage is you could say, like, maybe in Iowa or maybe in like North Dakota, you don't need a $15 minimum wage. Maybe you need a $12 minimum wage. And then like in like California, you need like a $20 minimum wage. So I think there is an argument there that like you could mandate that, like, I don't know how you would solve that, like based on like living status or the cost of living in a certain area, you could do the minimum wage based off of that. I don't know if that's a thing that would pique your interest or not.
Yeah, I feel like it wouldn't be that hard. You just have to figure out average standard of living. And, like in New York, it's going to be really high. And in Iowa, it might be different. But I think that's smart, as long as it all depends on who's overseeing it, If it's someone who's deciding what it can be and they're appointed by Trump, they're going to set the minimum wage at $2 or whatever. And if it's someone who's appointed by Bernie Sanders, they're going to try and make it actually fit the standard of living.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. So we kind of already talked about this a little bit, but I kind of want to switch up a little bit more again. Coming back to like the whole green energy thing, what would it mean? Like, how would the economy boom in America if we were to? Obviously, you'd have to wean off fossil fuels because, like you said, that's a huge part of our economy. But what are like the economic? How could the economy boom if we switched to green energy? Like, if we became a world leader in solar panel production, or if we became a world leader in wind, how could that make the economy boom? And could it?
Yeah, I recommend everyone read Facing the Anthropocene. I brought it up earlier. It's by Ian Angus. It's basically lays out all the ways we're destroying the planet, and then like his plan for stopping it, which is essentially taking a hold of the economy, right? So like the Green New Deal is a win-win for regular people, whether they realize it or not. So you're creating so many new jobs. It's based off the New Deal, which we know worked, but you're just putting it in the green energy sector. So of course, like, we need to do this for the planet. But like you said, if we nationalize this industry, we can create all these good paying jobs. So we can make sure all these people are unionized. They're all getting paid really good wages. They all have control over their workplace, and they're saving the planet. And we can expand that industry as far as we want. And we could also we could expand into things like rail, doing like high speed, like maglev trains that take way less or take almost no fossil fuels. They can be completely electronically powered. That's what they're doing in China right now, because obviously people have their gripes with China, but they control the economy. They can do whatever they want. So instead of their military fighting wars, their military is planning a giant forest the size of Ireland. That's really, just look it up, it's kind of cool. But like, if we grab a hold of our economy, of course we can make it boom. We can create any kind of industry we want. It's just the fact that it's privately run by now, and there's fossil fuels are more powerful than solar, so that's what we're going to keep going with.
Alrighty. Yeah. That's kind of all the questions that I have written down and all the topics, but is there anything that you want to branch off and talk about? We can go any direction that you want. And if you don't want to, we can leave it there and leave some other talking points for another podcast.
Let me see. Let me check my notes.
All right. Yeah.
I think I talked about everything I wanted to, but yeah, I don't know. I guess I was just watching your video with Ben Shapiro, and he's claiming environmentalism is paganism. It just made me like, there is a problem with like liberal environmentalists who are just like, recycle and use paper straws and we'll be fine. And Shapiro was talking about recycling, and there are issues with recycling because what comes and picks up your recycling? A truck that's dumping CO2 into their air. Like, so the problems are a lot deeper than this. So you got, like I said, the false choice between Ben Shapiro on the right, who thinks Earth Day is from the devil or whatever, is and then on the left you have like these liberals who don't want to change their way of living, who are like, oh, use plastic straws. It's like, that's not doing anything either. So we just have to think about real solutions and how we're going to wean our economy off of fossil fuels is the main thing, of course.
Yeah, and I think that, dude, that video was kind of fun to make because it's so easy to fucking kill. Like, I know he's like Jewish or whatever, and I'm sure Hanukkah has its fair share of like pagan traditions that are carried on. But like, dude, he obviously he's like a big proponent of like Christianity too, because that's like his entire like the entire right wing is like really Christian fundamentalist. Like, like Christmas is literally like a pagan thing. Like the Christmas tree is pagan. Like Saint Nicholas, Santa Claus is pagan. I mean, like the Easter Bunny is pagan. Like those things have nothing to do with Jesus. Like they have something to do with like a pagan holiday. Like, and it's like bringing that up to like try to make a political point when like it's completely like you don't care about it when somebody else is doing it, but when somebody on your side, you know what I mean? It's like
Uh-huh.
I don't know.
I don't know. I never know what he's talking about. It's so funny how he claims to be the facts guy, and he's just like the
Yeah.
biggest, maybe not the biggest hack because he doesn't support Trump, but like he's such a hack for the conservatives and for whoever's funding his
Yeah.
news outlet.
Who is the
I
biggest
don't know
hack?
who is. I
Yeah, like
think
Bill O'Reilly.
Sean Hannity.
Yeah,
If I had
Tucker
to pick
Carlson
one,
maybe a little bit. Tucker
I
Carlson
think
has some good points sometimes though.
yeah. Tucker's like one of my favorite. He at least understands like the appeal of socialism, and he knows that like a lot of the reason Trump won was because he was doing populist rhetoric, like bring back jobs, close the border so I can raise wages, stuff like that. And Tucker understands that, whereas Hannity's just like a mindless sycophant. When I listen to Sean Hannity, I'm like,
Yeah.
what's even going on up there other than just
Yeah.
mush, puppet,
Do you think a
whatever you
lot of those
want me to
people
say, daddy.
do you think a lot of those people are like they know what they're doing? Like they know that they're wrong in a lot of things. They just are trying to rile up the base so then they can elevate their capital.
Right. Yeah, they have to. I mean, have you read Manufacturing Consent by Chomsky?
I haven't read it, but I've heard of it.
It's all about how it's essentially in the hiring process, right? So like corporations and who are getting money from insurance companies and other advertisers run these institutions, CNN, MSNBC, Fox, and then they're in charge of the hiring process. So who are they going to hire? People who perpetuate their nonsense talking points. So
Yeah.
the people are probably just mindless, like Jake Tapper or Wolf Blitzer. I don't know if they've ever had like an original thought in their life. They're probably just they probably think of it like I'm just showing up and reading a script, and maybe they trick themselves a little bit, like, oh, I'm on the
Yeah.
right, I'm on the good team, or I'm on the left, so I'm on. But ultimately, they're just living their lavish lives, making millions a year to read off a teleprompter. But yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think they care.
Dude, whenever I see Wolf Blitzer, I just instantly fall asleep. I'm just like, the dude has like he has no personality. He's just reading, literally oozing liberal like talking points. I mean, he's just and like just let us be clear that I mean, as bad as Fox News is, MSNBC is up there and CNN's up there. I mean, they hate us just as much as Fox News hates us, if not more.
Yeah, Bernie did better on the town hall for Fox News than he did on CNN because CNN was smarter with their talking points because they trick you into thinking they're an ally. Like we're on the left, and then it's like, oh, you got to pay for Medicare for all 32 trillion, Bernie. How about that? Blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh, I thought you guys were on my side. Whereas Fox gave him a chance to talk. He had the freaking Fox News crowd cheering.
Yeah.
Which is something we need to think about, because we basically conceded the working class to Trump, or a lot of workers to Trump, or uneducated people vote for him. But like, if we sell these people on these ideas and kind of divorce ourselves from the Democratic Party or liberals, which they hate, like we can convince a lot of people of this stuff,
Yeah, and that's another huge question on the left is do we continue trying to take over the Democratic Party? Like, because I know I was in history class and we were talking about, dude, it's slipping my mind what we were talking about, but there was somebody on the right who that kind of took over the Republican Party at one point. I can't remember what we were talking about exactly, but my history teacher's like, is there any parallels going on today? And everybody was like, oh yeah, there's Bernie Sanders trying to like people know that we're not Democrats. You know what I mean?
Right.
We're not. People can see through that Bernie Sanders is different than like Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg. People know that he's different. So do we continue down the path of trying to take over the Democratic Party and or do we create our own party? And then do we break up the two-party system? It's an interesting question. I don't know if I don't know the answer to it, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't know. I think for now that like we're probably not going to destroy the Democratic Party this year or have the support to do that. So I think for now we have to continue to try and do that. And I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of candidates the left will produce. But yeah, I mean, the main thing is like organizing our workplaces, because to put ourselves in the position where we're going to be able to make a third party, that's what we're going to have to do anyways. We're going to have the power of workers, of labor, of industry to, be able to say, no, we'll halt the economy unless you give us these certain things like Medicare for all. Even if we manage to get a president, so, even if we have President AOC or whatever in 2024, it's going to be almost impossible to get Medicare for all through unless we have like either the ability to strike for it or Congress, and which is left and agrees with our policy, which just isn't going to happen over the next 4 years.
Yeah, it's just like we said in the last podcast, it's a tricky situation, and we're in it for the long haul. I mean, it's not going to happen overnight. Like, we got to realize that if you actually care about these policies and you actually care about fighting for like what you think is correct, and we're going to help the working class and take our country back from the corporations that own it right now. It's going to take time, because this entire system is based on everything that we despise, basically. I mean, even something as simple as healthcare something as simple as, oh, you break your leg and you go to the hospital, you're going to have to pay money for it. So it's about changing this entire system that we have built around us, and that takes time.
Yeah, it's a struggle. I mean, if you look at the history of like economic systems, you had like feudalism way back, and then that started to transition to capitalism, and in between that you had slavery, where they weren't paying people any wages, and then next came capitalism, which we've had for the last 200 plus years, and now we're slowly getting to the end of that. The problems of capitalism are getting huge, or staring us in the face, and now we're working our way, struggling towards something else. And we have things like the Scandinavian countries, like social democracies, like this might be the next step, and history is constantly evolving and working towards something better. But yeah, I mean, it takes time. It's a process. It never happens overnight.
Yeah. Last point that I kind of want to throw out there. This was interesting. In history class, again, we were talking about the Great Depression and how the United States was, and then really the rest of the modern world was kind of collapsing. You know what I mean? The entire economic structure completely collapsed, and it threw us into the worst times in history or whatever. But what a lot of people did was, a lot of Americans actually defected to Russia, because communism, there was no economic collapse there. I mean, people then started to think that communism was the way, and then that went into like the Red Scare and all kinds of stuff like that, which I'm not saying that communism is the way, but I'm saying that they didn't have an economic collapse when everybody else did. So obviously they were doing something correct. And in my opinion, it's a mixed economy is the way, but yeah.
When we're done with this, look up Proles of the Round Table, what life was like in the Soviet Union. So obviously, like, there were authoritarian aspects to it, but like you said, they had eliminated like racial inequality. Homelessness was 0. The greatest wealth inequality was 1 to 10. So like we were talking about what an ideal scale would be. They had like doctors, artists, and like scientists made like $10 to like whoever was at the bottom, the custodian or whatever, the least educated person made $1. So they were still fine, but there was that, you could climb your way up and do different professions. And then ended homelessness, got rid of wealth inequality, got rid of racial inequality. Rent was 2%. The average utilities were 4%. Every single person was unionized. Unions had huge power over the workplace. Like, you essentially could do whatever you wanted, or not whatever you wanted at work, but as long as you were getting your work done, your hours were much shorter. They had daycare for everybody, so like women could be in the workplace. They had like 33% representation by women on their legislature, so it's much more equal in that way. Like, despite, obviously, we have things that we look back and Stalin did wrong. A lot of those things he did, you have to look at the historical context of what he was doing. Like with a lot of the purges, he had a lot of people killed, but a lot of those people were Nazis who had worked their way in through the USSR and had positions in government. So it's like you have to look at the historical context of what he did, and you really have to look at the great things that they did, what they were able to do.
Yeah.
Especially following World War II, and then what took down the USSR, what actually made it collapse. Was it communism, or was it foreign intervention? Was it the CIA? Was it what we were doing behind the scenes,
Yeah, and it's not wrong to, obviously they're like Stalin was a dictator basically. It's not wrong to point out the things that certain countries who may do otherwise hideous things, what they do correct. Like I remember during the debates, Bernie like was getting railed because he said that Cuba had a good literacy rate. Like why rail against him for that? Like it's not wrong. Sure, I mean, it could be they do hideous things. Shit, we do hideous things all the time. We drop bombs on brown people in the Middle East for no type of reason other than oil and mineral wealth. It's like, but anybody who praises America is considered a patriot. But then, like, you know what I mean? So it's not wrong to look at the positives of certain places and maybe try to pick out the positives to better your society.
Right, of course. And like the kind of socialism we would want to build, we wouldn't want to take Soviet Russia system. We would want to build it based on America. You know, like one of the things Ho Chi Minh said, one of the great communist leaders in Vietnam who fought against the US in the Vietnam War, was he loved the Constitution. You know, he loved what the US claimed to stand for. And he wanted to show them what they could actually stand for. And if we create a kind of socialist economic system in the U.S., we can still have our, you know, our freedom of speech, our right to bear arms, or whatever. All these amendments that people, all the great things about America that people like, you know, we can still keep those. But it's like if the patriotism's so misplaced, because we get patriotism as in like we're the best no matter what. Let's go do more war. Like no, we should want to have the best infrastructure, the most widely educated people. We should be patriotic in these other ways rather than just being patriotic for the war machine.
Yeah, I think that's basically it for this entire thing. I'll let you say your final statement. Anything that you want to talk about, we can go on real quick. I think we kind of ended it pretty good there, but you can plug anything. You can say whatever you want. I'm sure I'll have you on again at some point in time, but anything that you want to say?
Read Why You Should Be a Trade Unionist by Len McCluskey.
There we go.
The last book I read. It's pretty good.
Okay. All righty. Sweet. And then I'll link your Twitter and your YouTube page in the description below. So anybody that likes my show can check you out and follow you on Twitter and all that good stuff. So thank you for being on. That was Eddie from Loras College. Thank you.